one that is going to give us a bit more guidance or a bit more information surrounding what organizational behavior is all about. How is it linked to management, and how do we use the information that is covered in organizational behavior so that we could actually put it into work or actually benefit from it and generate tangible outcomes. Okay? Now, when we think of organizations, or when we try to understand what organizations are all about, okay, when we're trying to kind of point a bit of a definition, or try to understand the characteristics of organizations, generally one key characteristic that we start off with is that organizations are social inventions. Okay? So they're kind of ideas in our head. Okay? Even though an organization or a company, specifically let's say a corporation or an office, is somewhere where you go into some sort of concrete building, and there's different kind of rooms, and there's actually a physical setup for an office or for a company or for a corporation. Generally, organizations, though, they're things that are made up. They are human-made. They are social constructs. They are social conventions. Okay? And what those social ideas or entities that we've built in our minds or built as a society, what they're all about, is they go towards or they work towards accomplishing a collective goal or a collective purpose. Okay? So, for example, if a university wants to inspire minds, okay, that's what they're working towards. They want to inspire minds. Okay? If a certain nutritional company wants to make sure that everybody is living a healthy life, okay, that is usually what's embodied in their mission statement or in their strategy, and that's what they're looking to achieve as an organization. Okay? A hospital wants to save lives. Okay? So organizations come to be because they want to achieve something, a common goal. They want to achieve some sort of outcome that has benefits to a wider group of people. And the last characteristic of organizations is that it usually takes more than one person to actually accomplish this effort. So it takes usually a group of 2 or more people, okay, that come together. Those 2 people or 2+ people come together because they both agree or they both stated some sort of interest in actually achieving this common goal, or they together built that common goal, and that's what makes them an organization going about doing something of benefit or of meaning or of value to society. Okay? So generally that's how we approach organizations to start with, and that's how we understand what an organization is. Okay? So 3 key characteristics. Organizations are social inventions or entities. Okay? They rely on group effort or collective effort. It takes more than one person to be able to achieve that common goal or that purpose. Okay? And that third characteristic is that they're all working towards the same thing, or ideally they are, right? And we'll talk more about that when it comes to the chapter on conflict or teamwork, right? So generally, we all go into organizations to work towards a common goal. Now, how much of that works out perfectly, 100% with 0 glitches? That's questionable. That's why we started off that. That's why we got into this setup. That's why we got into this organization for. To work towards that common goal. Okay? Now, one way that we study organizations, or one best way that has really helped us, especially for researchers, to understand organizations and why it is they do the work that they do, or why it is some of them survive over time and why some of them kind of dissipate and we never see them again. So why does Blockbuster not exist anymore, right? So things like that, how they respond to changes in the environment. So one way or one lens or one perspective that we've adopted that has really helped us understand why it is that organizations go through the stuff that they go through and why certain behaviors happen within them is we started thinking about organizations as open systems. Okay? And that's another key concept that you should be familiar with. Or another key concept that I do encourage you actually to try to implement and use when you're trying to understand different systems. Okay? When we say an organization is an open system, really all we're saying is that the organization is an entity. Remember, it's a social invention, it's a social entity, it's something that humans have created. And this emphasis on the open piece, the emphasis on it being an open system and not a closed system, let's say, really the reason why we actually emphasize that and we make sure that it's underscored, it's because organizations exist in society and they don't kind of exist in a siloed environment. Okay? Organizations are susceptible to the influences from the external environment. Okay? So an organization is a system in itself, This organization is present within a business environment, that is present within an economy, that is present within a socio-political environment, that is present within the world that we live in, that is present within the larger universe that we live in. Okay? And all of these are kind of multiple layers. They're bigger systems that we all exist and operate within. Okay? And even within the organization, there are smaller systems that occupy it, that help it run. Okay? So those are kind of like wheels that get the organization going. So remember, an organization is made up of 2 or more people. Okay? And they're the ones who are contributing effort. They're contributing inputs and generating outputs from them. Right? The human beings, the employees themselves are systems. Us as human beings, each one of you, you are a system. In yourself, you are a system. Okay? You have all sorts of circuits and wires going on. You have all sorts of emotions and moods and attitudes and behaviors. All of that is a system in itself. And you yourself are also an open system. You're susceptible to how others engage with you. You're susceptible to the impact of the economy and how the financial crisis perhaps is affecting you as a person, right? So you yourself, you're an open system as well. Okay? And then we take you and put you in a group of other open systems in a bigger open system that we call the organization. Okay? So again, going back to the organization as an open system, it's a system that is affected by external forces, so the economy, the socio-political environment, government regulation. Okay? All these things affect us as an organization, but also the organization and how it goes about achieving its outcomes and how it operates is also affected from the inside. Okay? So the reason why we allocate a lot of attention and effort to studying job satisfaction and motivation, and the reason why we put in a lot of investment into our human capital in organizations is because, let's say I don't have a happy workforce, I don't have a workforce that is satisfied with their jobs, a workforce that is not motivated, then they're going to cease to operate. They're not going to operate very effectively. And there's an internal influence that is going to affect the overall functioning of the organization. Okay? So, to take that perspective or employ that lens when you're understanding how an organization operates and how it goes about achieving the outcomes that it's set out to achieve. Okay? Now, another thing that we have to understand is that organizations are also, apart from kind of going about achieving their outcomes, so yes, as a hospital, my job is to save lives, or one key motive of mine is to help save lives or help people live healthy lives. But organizations are also dealing with a lot of the changes going on in the environment. So another key thing, another key priority for them, apart from accomplishing that common goal, is how do they make sure and how do they manage to survive the times, the change of times, and how are they always adapting to the changes that are being kind of put on them or being put forward in front of them. Okay? So that's another area that organizations work really hard at accomplishing or doing work in. Is how do they accomplish their goal, their main purpose, but also how do they make sure that their survival is not at stake? How do they make sure that they're staying relevant? Okay? How do they make sure that customers are still coming to them? How do they make sure that they're still hiring the best doctors to help them save lives? Okay? How do they make sure that they're understanding how new technology is going to affect the way they operate? Artificial intelligence, for example, right? A very hot topic for us right now in society. Okay? We're dabbling or we're trying to understand how artificial intelligence is going to affect the number of jobs that are out there, whose job is going to be replaced, whose job is going to be augmented, okay? Whose job is going to become harder, what other new jobs are being created as part of this new trend that we have. Okay? So how organizations cope with that and how they manage to survive those major changes and phenomena that go on in the world, okay? That is also another thing that organizations seek to do or are in pursuit of. Okay? And to be able to do that, organizations rely on the people that drive them, right? So if I find myself to be operating as an organization in an environment that requires innovation and efficiency, okay, then it's safe to say that you also require human capital or employees who also have an innovative mindset, have a creative mindset that is able to generate efficiencies for the organization and how it operates. Okay? So another thing about organizations is that there are multiple layers within them, right? So yes, I hired you as an individual, okay, and that's the basic level, but as an individual, I'm putting you in a team, that's another level, the team level. Okay? So you're going to take all your human capital, all your knowledge, all your skills, all your abilities, and you're going to contribute them within a team environment. So then that team could help the organizational level achieve outcomes for everybody. Okay? So organization is also multi-level, it's multi-layered. Okay? And the final outcome is really dependent on all of us bringing in our individual capabilities and capacities and efforts together in a cohesive way so that we could get to that final positive outcome. Okay? Because at the end of the day, as we already mentioned, survival and an adaptation to change, okay, those are really pivotal things for an organization. And that in itself substantiates why it is that we need to understand organizational behavior, or why it is that we study organizational behavior to start with. Okay? Because if I am dependent on those people to drive the efforts within my organization, if I am dependent on those people to come into work every day, 9 to 5, and do good, productive work, okay, I need to understand their attitudes and their behaviors. Okay? I need to make sure that they're satisfied. I need to make sure that they're motivated. I need to make sure that their pay is determined in a fair and objective manner so that they don't feel it's unfair in any way, because otherwise the whole system will topple. It will stop working. And then survival and adaptation to change is at risk. Okay? Questions? Yeah, we don't stop there. Just goes 5 days.
I still don't understand what you mean as open system. Like, can you explain?
Okay, so the organization is kind of think of it as a context, as an environment, right? And it's not a closed bubble. Okay, that environment is not a closed bubble where it's like we're so powerful and nothing will shatter us. It actually has kind of holes in it, and it has certain weak points. Okay, so and those weak points are susceptible to the influence of the economy. Right? So let's say there's a financial crisis going on. What sometimes is happening in organizations is to be able to survive amidst those financial tough times is we need to lay off people, right? Because otherwise we'll run out of money or we'll be in debt and then we can't survive, right? So that's how that survival and adaptation is always working. It's kind of always kind of reading the information that's coming from the outside and saying, okay, what needs to be done to actually make sure we're still relevant and we're still existent, okay? So that's what we mean by an open system. Okay, so it's not a closed bubble.
So it is as time goes on, new problems.
It's always it's new problems coming up, new consumer demands, new values. Okay, so for example, values, societal values change all the time. Our values pertaining to diversity, okay? They're definitely not the same as they were 20 years ago. And sometimes that does dictate certain things on organizations. They have to change in accordance. Okay? Our tastes and preferences change over time. And that does mean certain things for organizations. Okay? So companies like Coke and Pepsi, okay, 20 or 30 years ago, everybody was okay with soda, everybody was okay with sugary drinks. Now it's quite different. So you have companies like Coke and Pepsi, they're actually changing up their game. They're actually focusing on food products, and they're no longer focusing on beverages. Okay? Now, what does that entail when it comes to the human capital component? Maybe they needed to hire more creative employees to help them understand, how do we shift from that to that? They needed more efficient employees. They needed more innovative employees. Maybe they needed to branch out into other countries who have better know-how surrounding this type of operation versus beverage operation. Okay? More questions? Okay. Moving forward. So, when it comes to understanding what it is that organizational behavior as a field, what it studies or what it focuses on, essentially we're concerned with 3 things. In OB, as researchers, we've studied the attitudes and the behaviors of individuals. Okay? So that's your individual level, okay, the most basic level. So we study things like job satisfaction, we study things like motivation, we study employee identity in the workplace. So when it comes to diversity, when it comes to studying diversity in the workplace, that also falls under OB because we understand identity dynamics in the workplace. Okay? So those are some examples of things we deal with at the individual level. We also study organizational structures and how organizations are set up in a sense. So you might hear of certain organizations like startups that are much more flatter in nature. Okay? They are more flexible, they are more casual environments. There is no hierarchy in those organizations. And then you might go to another organization, let's say a public organization, a governmental ministry, let's say, and they might have more of a hierarchy to them. Okay? So we also study that in organizational behavior, because the way people are coordinated in a certain setting and the way they're reporting to each other will definitely have influence on the power dynamics between them, will have some influence on how they relate to one another and how they report to one another. So that is another thing that falls under our umbrella as OB researchers. And lastly, one thing that we already honed in quite a bit is how an organization relates to the external environment. Okay? So for example, our attitudes surrounding work-life balance, okay? Our attitudes surrounding women's career progression in the workplace, okay? Our attitudes towards being inclusive of LGBTQ plus persons in the workplace. Those are things that are always changing in the external environment, okay? So we have changing societal values, and how we adapt as an organization to address those changing phenomena is also something that we study, okay? Because again, an organization is run by human beings. And if those human beings are dealing with those changes externally, they're probably also bringing them internally to some extent. Okay? So that is another capacity in which we operate as OB researchers. Questions about that? Okay, awesome. And finally, what OB does is by studying all these three things is it helps us predict, explain, and manage organizational behavior events. Okay? And again, as I told you a bit earlier when we were doing the intro, we do all of that in the pursuit or in the hopes that we're doing or practicing evidence-based management. Okay? So essentially, we want to move away from actually making decisions willy-nilly. We want to be making decisions that are more founded in science, decisions that are founded in evidence. Okay? And that's where OB steps in and helps us do that. Okay? So as OB researchers, sorry, I just noticed I'm blocking you guys. As OB researchers, we start by predicting certain things. Okay? So we say highly engaged employees will generate higher productivity levels or higher performance levels. And then after that, we test that hypothesis. We say, is it true? Is it something that is founded in evidence? Is it something that will actually come to be? Okay? And we try to unfold or try to kind of delineate how this relationship comes about. So how is it that engagement generates higher productivity or better performance? Okay? So we explain that to people. We explain that to practitioners. We try to tell them what it is that actually means engagement will generate higher performance. Okay? So if we take this class as an example, let's say this class is an organization, okay, and we're all working towards getting a good grade, and all of you working towards achieving great learning outcomes. Okay? I told you earlier in the lecture today, I've noticed that highly engaged students in my class tend to generate higher grades. They always tend to get A+. Okay? If you ask me, well, why is that? Why did you notice that correlation? Why do you think that is, and why are you recommending it to us? Okay? So that's where I enter the explanation. So I try to kind of lay out, well, okay, people who are engaged, students who have historically been engaged in my class, have tended to be more vocal. They've asked a lot of questions. So that is kind of something that is helping this relationship. Okay? They tended to talk more to their colleagues in class, and they were able to resolve certain challenging areas with them. They were able to get help on assignments from their friends because, that they were always engaged, they were always vocal, so everybody knew them in class. Okay? So it made for a better environment for them to do better in class, right? So I might tell you these things. I might lay out all these different activities that students do that take that engagement and generate high performance from it. Okay? And then by doing that, I facilitate that management piece. Okay? So when I, as an OB researcher, give that information to practitioners, to HR practitioners, or to CEOs, or somebody who's like a chief of culture and people at organizations, what that does is it gives them a better idea as to what it is they should be doing, what programs, what tools they should be offering their employees. Okay? So if I say, well, highly engaged employees who are very social in organizations tend to do better in terms of their job performance, and I think it's because they are sitting in more social environments and they're interacting more with others and getting a lot of knowledge and sharing advice between each other. That's what enables that. Well, then an HR practitioner might say, okay, well, maybe we need to rely more on teamwork. Maybe teamwork is really the essence of this higher job performance. Okay? So the reason we invest in predicting and explaining these relationships and these phenomena that go on is to enable us to work with it and manage it. Okay? So what it is, what does it take to actually get somebody to report higher levels of job satisfaction? Okay? When I deliver that research, when I tell a practitioner what it is that actually generates that, they are able to build programs and initiatives on that basis, and they are better able to manage it and better able to achieve it in the organization. Okay? And that is essentially what we talk about, or what we're aiming for when we talk about evidence-based management. Okay? We don't want to be saying, well, people are motivated by food, I think, so we're going to get them pizza every Friday, and that's going to solve everything in the organization, and they're going to be fully job satisfied for 10 years. That's a bit of a bias there, maybe because you like pizza, and not everybody likes pizza, so it is much more, it's much better strategy to look into the OB literature and find out what it is that actually generates sustainable job satisfaction and base it off of that. Okay? So evidence-based management is when we use that best scientific evidence. Okay? So when we rely on peer-reviewed papers, when we rely on the work of researchers in industrial psychology and in organizational behavior, or sociologists that deliver this research to us. Okay? When we rely on that type of scientific evidence, that's when we're practicing evidence-based management. If you take a book, for example, let's say by Donald Trump, okay, a book on his negotiation skills or his sales strategies. Okay, that is not scientific evidence. That is simply the opinion of somebody who was a practitioner at one point. Okay, I would clearly not recommend it for negotiation, given what we're saying right now. But be able to distinguish between opinion and scientific evidence. Okay, any kind of actor or any sort of business person who writes a book about what's worked for them, it simply worked for them at a certain time in a certain environment. Okay? But it doesn't mean that it's something that will work for everybody across the board. Okay? So that's why we want to advocate using scientific evidence and not just simply opinions or hunches or biases. Okay? Are we clear on evidence-based management and what it consists of? Questions about OB, what we study, evidence-based management, some sort of interaction, guys, please, hands up. No, yes.
There you go. Yeah. By using evidence-based management, do you feel like you lose kind of personal touch with your employees, or is there like a change that doesn't affect?
Not necessarily. I mean, so that's the thing. That's fair. I think when we propose something like evidence-based management, people automatically kind of think like logistics, what is it, TQM, Total Quality Management or something like that, or Lean Six Sigma, or like they're starting to kind of picture, your operations. They're starting to kind of build those images of like an assembly line in their mind, right? And that's not the case, right? It's kind of like I could see why there's a tendency or there's that bias kind of drift to that image. But it doesn't have to be, because also when we study when we study motivation, when we study well-being, when we study life satisfaction, those are also, you're not completely studying kind of very rigid things in evidence-based management, or when you're practicing evidence-based management. You're also studying the relational things as well, and figuring out kind of more secure or more guaranteed ways to help achieve that. Okay? So for example, when it comes to mental health or isolation in the workplace, right? We do study the impact that leaders have on their employees and how leaders could help their employees achieve better mental health outcomes in the workplace, right? So that's not formulaic, right? Because what we're advocating when it comes to those types of studies is really, we're usually pushing leaders to kind of be more social or be more attuned to the personal relationship with their employee. So that's still evidence-based management, right? We're not becoming robots. We're not advocating. Okay. More questions? Okay. And moving forward, we talked a bit about kind of that management piece, or the act of managing. One thing that we have to keep in mind, and given that we talked about how it's important to kind of always be, always changing times and always making sure that an organization is surviving and adapting, one thing that we have to build into our expectations or be very cognizant of is that when it comes to management, you cannot subscribe to kind of this just one fixed approach will work across different situations, will work across all times. Okay? We want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that you do need to be flexible in the way you manage as well. And this is what we term or what we coin as the contingency approach. Okay? Contingency by definition, just if you pick up a dictionary and look it up, right? It kind of is referring to the idea of like it depends. Okay? There are different factors that things depend on, okay, that are contingent on. And when we talk about the contingency approach to management or a contingency perspective when it comes to management, it's essentially to reinforce or to help people understand that at the end of the day, you cannot subscribe to just one method of management. You cannot think that one approach will always work. You have to be very flexible and you have to be very good at reading your environment and understanding the external forces, okay, or the external changes. And you have to always be agile. You have to always make sure that you're adapting to them. Okay? So that's one thing that you need to build into your managerial style as a leader or as a manager in an organization. Okay? So that's really what we're referring to when it comes to the contingency approach. Okay? It all depends. Okay? Times change, events change, different things come up, and it's not really a good or effective idea or approach to kind of just be fixed in one way of doing things. Okay? That is why some organizations become irrelevant for consumers. When they become so fixed in one way of doing things. When they get very comfortable with the status quo and they don't want to change things up. When they don't want to innovate. When they don't want to create. When they don't want to become more efficient. Okay? That's rigid. That's a very rigid approach. And you're not really becoming attuned to what is going on out there. Okay? And organizations are always changing. Right? Sometimes they start out very hierarchical. And then they kind of become more relaxed over time. And sometimes they, emerge as very relaxed environments and casual environments, and then they become hierarchical. Okay? One example of that, for example, is Facebook. Okay? Facebook, when it first started, it came to be as, a group of guys, a very small group of guys, kind of came together and created this thing, and they were living in just a house or a garage or whatever it is, in Silicon Valley, and they were just kind of very casual, very relaxed, very open to new ideas, and just experimenting with it. But over time, and right now especially, you could argue Facebook is quite hierarchical, okay? And it's not any different from an organization that's existed for a long time. It no longer has that full-on startup culture that it had when it first started, okay? And that's because it's scaled up. Now it wants to be a global operation. They have offices across the world, okay? So it's not realistic for them to maintain that casual, relaxed environment where there is no sort of system of reporting to people, there is no sort of hierarchy, there is no sort of mechanism in place on which to operate. Okay? That works for you, that casual approach or that startup culture worked for them at a time when they were very small and operating maybe in one country or in one location. But once they scaled up, once they diversified their operations, it needed more reining in. Okay? So organizations are always changing to adapt to those internal and external influences. Okay? Question about the contingency approach. And finally, as we move towards kind of getting a bit of a wrap-up surrounding this chapter, earlier on we mentioned that organizations are always working towards achieving a common purpose or a common goal or some sort of mission or strategy. Okay? One way to think about it is in terms of organizational effectiveness. Organizations are generally always working towards yielding tangible, positive, effective outcomes. Okay? And one thing that we need to touch on, or one thing that we need to be cognizant of, is that effectiveness is a very broad concept, and it could mean different things, right? So if you are to have an effective learning experience in the university, sure, grades are one of those aspects, but also building good relationships with people is another aspect, I would say. Getting engaged in extracurricular activities is another aspect. Getting some work experience on campus is another aspect of that effective university experience. Okay? And organizations are the same way. Okay? So sure profit is one of those outcomes that we want to make sure we achieve because it facilitates our survival over time. But there's more to it. Organizational effectiveness is a broader concept. It's a broader idea. Okay? And they generally fall under four perspectives or four approaches. Okay? So the first approach is the open systems approach, which is saying kind of when an organization survives and adapts to external and internal influences, that is a sign of effectiveness, right? So Blockbuster, not an effective organization because they did not keep up with the times. They did not respond well to changing external and internal influences. Okay? So that's one way we can understand that first perspective. The second perspective is organizational learning. Okay? It is very, very, very important and pivotal for organizations to always be generating knowledge and insight and make sure that they're capturing that knowledge and insight inside it. Okay? A current example or something that we're seeing nowadays that is receiving a lot of attention is data analytics, for example. Okay? So the reason why I'm investing a great deal in marketing, in analytics and understanding consumer behavior and trying to predict purchasing patterns, to inform about how we're going to supply our stores. Okay? That is all knowledge and insights. Okay? That is arming the organization with a competitive advantage. Okay? It's making their operations more effective and more efficient because they really understand their customer. Okay? Similar thing when it comes to human capital. Just like we have marketing analytics, we also have HR analytics. Okay? And those are analytics pertaining to, how do we optimize employees and their contributions in the organizations. Okay? So next week we're going to be touching on personality. And we have a very scientific approach to personality in organizations. Okay? We're going to be talking about why we run you through a personality assessment when you're usually applying for a job. Okay? So that, in a sense, that's a form of analytics. We're trying to understand who succeeds in our organization. What type of personality profile succeeds in our organization. So when we take that knowledge, capture it, and understand it better, we are able to make more effective decisions. Okay? A lot of organizations are even branching into this area of advisory and knowledge creation. Okay? So you'll find a lot of the consulting firms. So any of you who are interested in technology consulting or strategy consulting, okay? A lot of these firms like Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, McKinsey, BCG, they're really putting in a lot of effort into building arms or building operations within those organizations to actually generate insights and knowledge. They do research, okay? Because they're trying to understand what does it take to become better as organizations and as societies and as organizations. Okay? So when we have a learning organization, an organization that remains current on what is happening out there, okay, and is innovating and is always engaging in research and generating insights, that's another sign of an effective organization. Okay? Questions so far about the first two perspectives or approaches to understanding effectiveness? The third perspective is high-performance work practices. And that is one that really relates to your human capital and the people that you hire in your organization. So it turns out that another sign of an effective organization or a good organization that is achieving great positive outcomes is essentially an organization that invests in its employees and in their development. Okay? So if you have an organization that is not really engaging in any training for their employees, it's not really building them up, it's not really challenging them, it's not offering them meaningful work, you say that that's an organization that's not empowering its employees. They're not engaging in work practices that are meant to generate high performance. Okay? They're kind of just maintaining it as status quo. They're not really actually challenging themselves at all. Okay? So that's another perspective that we dealt with when we're trying to understand whether an organization is effective or not. So an organization that actually challenges its employees, builds them up, develops them, and their skills and capital, that's an effective organization. And lastly, a final perspective is the stakeholder perspective. Okay? When I started off on this slide, we talked about how it's not only about profit. Okay? And that's another major shift that we probably observed over the past 10 to 20 years in understanding organizations or corporations specifically. is that we've moved beyond this idea that organizations are simply there to make money and make profit. They're actually there to serve a bigger purpose. They are citizens of society, right? Organizations are quite powerful. They are very powerful entities, okay? Sometimes they are very powerful or very helpful in helping us generate societal change. Because again, remember, they're social entities that house a lot of people working towards a common goal. That is major. That is a pivotal thing. Okay? An organization cannot solely exist to just make profit. It has other things that it needs to do. And it has other people or stakeholders that it's liable to. Okay? And that's where we have that idea of people, planet, profit. Okay? So alongside profit, we have to care about people. So the society that we exist within. Are we serving society as well? Are we bettering our societies? Okay? And the planet, right? Sustainability. How do we make sure that we're making environmentally conscious decisions as an organization? Okay? So that's that final perspective. Okay? People, planet, profit, or economy, society, and environment. It all falls under the triple bottom line. Okay? It's really there to kind of reinforce that idea that organizations are not there just to make profit. Okay? It's very short-sighted if we say that the only measure of effectiveness is profit. There's also people and planet. Okay? CSR, corporate social responsibility. Do we know about it? No? No? Okay. So what we're seeing right now in organizations over the past 10 years almost, there's been an emergence of this phenomenon or approach of corporate social responsibility. And it is really focused on that final perspective. Organizations are opening up operations and departments within them specifically geared towards CSR or corporate social responsibility efforts. Okay? So how do we make sure that as H&M, our operations are very sustainable, they're not environmentally unfriendly, right? So that's kind of the purpose that those initiatives serve, is how do we make sure that our operations across the organization, okay, are taking care of society and the environment alongside profit. Okay? So that's just one thing to keep in mind because it is becoming quite a prevalent topic and one of the major phenomena out there that you might hear dropped in conversations surrounding business. Okay? Questions about the different perspectives of effectiveness or what constitutes effectiveness? Cool. This is a slide just to kind of give you a bit of an idea. When we talk about intellectual capital, we have the human capital side of it, so that's kind of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you house within your employees. We have the structural capital, so for example, things like, do we even have databases to capture the knowledge and the insights that we generate, to capture the analytics that we generate in our organization? And then we have relationship capital, right? So the reason why we advocate teamwork is because when we work together, when we collaborate, we bounce off each other's ideas. So that is good. That is a form of capital as well. And another kind of slide just to give you a more kind of comprehensive idea as to how it is that learning happens in organizations. So, or the different facets of it. Part of it is storing. So again, do I have appropriate mechanisms to store the analytics that I generate and for people to access them at a later time? Okay. Do I have appropriate mechanisms to acquire that knowledge? Okay, am I going to hire a research firm to actually generate those insights for me? Okay, how do we use them? Okay, are we running brown bag lunches where we disseminate all this information to our employees on a regular basis? Okay, is it published in a newsletter? Okay, how do we make that information accessible throughout the organization? And then sharing it again. So do I have a learning management system? Do I have a training system that employees could access this? Okay. So those two slides, just keep that in mind. They're good things to kind of be aware of when it comes to the ideas of human capital or capital in general and learning in organizations. And finally, when we talk about organizations, as I mentioned earlier, they are multi-level. Okay? So it does rely on group effort, but the way organizations start off is we start off with kind of some basic foundations. Okay? So you enter an organization that has kind of a basic structure. Then you, as an employee, as an individual, you come in and you input your knowledge, your skills, and abilities. Okay, that will generate some outcomes. Okay, we can escalate that and make them team outcomes. When we all work together to do that, it becomes a team outcome, and that's what in the end generates organizational effectiveness. Okay, so just also another slide, just to give you kind of a bit of a graphic way of depicting kind of everything that we've already discussed, or how it all looks when we take a holistic picture or of a bug picture. Question?
Does HR and OB have like an effect that the manager has, or they're just consulting the firms of the powers like how to run things?
HR specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't have anything together like department called OB company?
No. So that's the relationship between OB and HR. HR, if you will, is the practical arm of OB, where HR is founded on the knowledge that is generated in OB. OB, if you want, is the more scientific layer. Okay? And then HR comes along and says, given all this science, we're going to develop initiatives and resources and tools so that organizations can use them. Okay? So that's kind of where HR comes in. It's that mediator between kind of the OB scientists and researchers and practitioners. Okay? So that's why, yes, you're more likely to find an HR department in an organization and not an OB department. Right? Now, we are seeing more of a shift to organizations allocating more effort and more resources to having behavioral analysts or people who are well versed in things like organizational behavior or sociology or psychology kind of come in and help them understand, the people side of things. Banks are doing it quite a bit. Example, so you find places like Scotiabank. Scotiabank has a digital factory. If you've heard about it, really this digital factory is solely dedicated to understanding, the consumer experience in the bank. How do you innovate on it? How do you make it more cutting edge? Right? So it's a very behavioral effort. So we are starting to see a shift towards that. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see an OB department in an organization. That's what HR ideally serves. But that's also not to say like it's common to see kind of the VP of people and culture. That is ideally someone who has good training at OB and will be able to do that. Okay. Questions about the different concepts that we covered? Okay. The last portion of our lecture for today is just kind of touching on a few phenomena that are prevalent or have been prevalent over the past 10 to 20 years and understanding what implications they have on organizational functioning and some of the key things or some of the key values that we encounter. So, the first one, technological change. What are your thoughts on that? Is it good? Is it bad? Advantages, disadvantages. What are you seeing out there when it comes to technological change? Really, this is a very just go number. Robot. Okay, so artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on artificial intelligence? Do you think it's good? Is it replacing jobs?
Depends on what part of the industry it is.
Okay, so certain jobs that might augment them, other jobs that may deplete them or not be good for them. So that's a major argument out there. Victoria and then Corey.
It's making some of them easier to do.
Exactly. Absolutely. Corey. Everybody. Sorry, I can't see your name. Okay.
Yeah, I think augmentation and all that. I think it has like a limit because most require like emotional intelligence and all that, which it's like an algorithm.
Okay. And do you argue that after, like, when it reaches that limit of augmentation, are we then that job is useless? Like, is it replacing it?
I think it would create a lot more new jobs.
New jobs. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So absolutely, technological change could be kind of changing the structure of things, structure of jobs. It might create new jobs for us. I can't remember the order of things, but let's start with Diego, and then we'll go down to Alina.
I think I agree with technological change as long as it's motivated not by laziness, but for wanting to do something else, like carry it.
Okay. Create, innovate. Okay. Okay. Alina.
I agree with it in some cases. However, I think it's quite it could be controversial because you started this whole idea of 3D printing, and then we bring in body parts into it, and then we bring in. It could be quite controversial.
There are some ethical concerns that are being brought forward for sure. Ella.
Yeah, but just want to say more ethical changes because we're going to take that.
Okay. Anyways, Any other thoughts on any technological change that has affected the way we work? Any negative concerns?
I think that it makes it more lazy because
Lazy,
there's other
right.
things that can do it for us.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Moving on to globalization. That is a trend. What are some things that we notice? What are some concerns as it pertains to the way we work? How could globalization, opening up the world of work, opening up the way we interact with each other as organizations, what impact does that have on the world of work? Losing jobs, for sure, right? When we outsource, we're of that. Yes, sir. Shadman.
Yeah, especially when you outsource, there's a lot of ethical considerations that need to have.
Absolutely.
Political reasons.
Absolutely. We've seen that with companies here like RBC making those decisions, for sure. Any other things pertaining to globalization that might be of concern to us in organizations, Matt?
Companies when they want to evade taxes.
Sure. Okay. On the financial side of things, that's ethical concerns. Okay. For sure. One last thing that we should probably mention about globalization, and one thing that we really study under organizational behavior and HR as well, is diversity, right? As a more open organization, as an organization that is interacting with more entities out there across the world, one thing that we have to keep in mind is how are all these different people with different backgrounds, different schools of thought coming together and working together towards that common goal. So that's one thing that we also allocate a lot of attention to is how do we optimize that relationship? Because diversity and differences are great, but also there is some riskiness when we first bring people together who are different. Okay? They might run into some conflict. So how do we move past that, and how do we leverage diversity to its best? Sure.
Well, I was going to add on to that about how when we operate in different countries, so consideration of cultures.
Yeah.
Talking more about how people work together from different cultures, but I was just going to say when you move to a different part of the world, there's a lot of cultural shock and consideration that needs to.
So expatriates for HR, that is something that HR concerns itself with, is how do we expatriate our employees when we're sending them abroad, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
Also language barriers.
For sure. Some of the more technical and logistical things that come with it. Okay. Moving forward to talking about kind of the employment relationship, or a key aspect of that employment relationship is remote work. Okay? So when we talk about telecommuting or working off-site, what are your thoughts on that? Is it good? Is it not good? Does it help us achieve work-life balance? Are there negatives to it? What are your thoughts on this trend of telecommuting or working off-site? Having the flexibility to come into work whenever you want and leaving whenever you want, as long as you get the work done. Thoughts? Are we for it? Are we against it? Zara?
So there are definitely great benefits for it,
Okay.
especially for parents with a small child. That would be great. However, it depends on the personality of the person. If they're procrastinated, that don't want to get the job done, and they know it, maybe it's better for them to work in a structure.
Okay. Bring them in, kind of, perhaps. And then
So for the company or the organization that has this plan, it's going to be a lot nicer.
Money saving, okay, for sure, right? So yeah, we have to take a practical approach to it. And a lot of organizations are pushing for it because sure, it saves money when it comes to real estate, saves money when it comes to kind of your daily operations like electricity even, office supplies, right? We're taking that cost and pushing it onto the employee. Now the employee is having to pay for that at their own house, rather than Noah.
Well, there's a lot of coordination that's involved, and it's also very risky to do if you're doing remote work.
Okay, so why is it risky?
Well, because there's less, I don't really know.
Oversight?
Yeah, oversight.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're doing a project that has a lot of different remote
Okay.
work, so then you're adding on more
layer of complexity.
Exactly.
That's a great point. Okay, so generally speaking, everybody is like, hurrah, work-life balance programs and remote work, and it's the greatest thing ever. But one thing that we have to keep in mind, and that's where that contingency approach comes in, it's not for every organization. It's not for every project. It's not for every person. Okay? It really depends. Not every organization is able to kind of rely a lot on work-life balance programs or remote work or telecommuting. Okay? I saw that firsthand in the organization that was our client when I worked in consulting. Okay? That organization was based in North Carolina. It had people working all over the U.S. Okay? And it was project work. And it was time-sensitive work. And accountability just went downhill. People who are working in California, you're only accessing them accessing them by phone. So if they don't finish the work or if they don't, do their work properly, there's less of a concern or there's less accountability that they're associating with it, because what are you going to do over the phone to them, right? They really don't kind of feel the trepidation or the level of responsibility that is there when they're in the office. Okay? So that's something that we want to keep in mind. It's not for every type of organization. It's not for every type of project. Okay? For some types of work, sure, it might work great. But again, it's not for everyone. Alina.
When it comes to having that like a set of hours when you're bringing things in, you kind of have an issue that comes out with security issues.
Sure.
Because if you have that, for instance, if you're taking home a device that you're now working, you have a laptop that you're working at home with for documents from the bank, you're doing a global project or something, you have that security issue that you can't necessarily always control.
If you're a nurse, let's say, if you're an epidemiologist, can you take patient information and just have it at home, right? Okay. Another one?
I was going to say from the worker's perspective that it does promote a healthier lifestyle than the 9 to 5.
Okay, so why do you think it promotes a healthier lifestyle?
I find that, well, I mean, it also depends on the person.
Okay, sure.
And what activity.
But generally speaking, on average, like, why is it better?
Well, because when you go into an office, generally your office is sitting at a desk and it's fine.
Okay.
And so when you're at home, you have the opportunity to, go for a walk.
Move
or
around, okay.
walk the dog or whatever.
Okay, so really your name is Danielle. Okay, go ahead.
Just to kind of argue like the flip side of that,
Okay.
with the technological changes
Sure,
and employers expecting employees to always be able to access their technology, and you really are juggling that like work-life balance, and you're never really disconnecting from your work.
Yep.
Employees can feel like they should always be working because they have access to the internet and their computer.
So that's the flip side.
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah. And that is something that we have grappled with. And generally what you'll find so different things too. Yes, one key concern of remote work or like technological change and kind of no longer having to report to the workplace is, on one hand, yes, you do have more authority over your lifestyle and how you want to navigate your work on a day-to-day basis. But the other risky side of it is kind of we're no longer establishing a strong boundary between what is considered to be work and what is non-work. What is my work life and what is my non-work life, right? It's all blending in. It's all becoming very blurred, right? So you might have to be available all throughout the day because everybody is working on their own schedule all throughout the day, okay? And that is a concern. So that's why you have countries like, for example, Germany, they were releasing laws a few years ago surrounding that by 4 p.m. nobody is allowed to check their work phone anymore. So that is the key concern of like when our work and non-work life become blurred. That's really something that really just counters the whole work-life balance idea. So it's not all useless.
I just think that's why we're seeing such high levels of burnout.
Exactly.
We're never really unplugged.
Okay. Absolutely. And another thing that comes with it is the isolation piece. Yes, having the ability to control your own schedule on a day-to-day basis and having the leeway to kind of be able to run errands in the middle of the day is great, but also do not discount the isolating aspect of remote work. Okay? You're no longer stepping into an office and being able to engage with others and being able to vent surrounding some issues, right? I think we've gotten to a point where we're really losing sight or really underestimating as human beings the value of social capital and the value of human relationships. And that's why you're seeing a lot more effort going into studying mental health and studying things like isolation. There was actually a segment on CBC, I think, a night ago, on isolation and some of the programs that are being done. Like there's a service where people hire somebody to give them a call for 30 minutes every week just to engage with them socially by phone because they have no other way of socially engaging with other people in their life. And that is a service that is offered out there right now. And it's quite alarming. I was watching it yesterday and I was like, holy crap, this is alarming. So yes, remote work is great, but do not discount the isolating nature of it. Okay? And for example, I can tell you, for now, like you're in school and you're constantly socializing with people and you're constantly interacting with people, but try kind of 2 years after you're out of school. try 2 years into your career, and especially if you're working in a big city, in a big corporate environment, you have to be very careful about maintaining that social aspect of your life, because otherwise it could become very isolating. Some careers, by nature, just some careers in general, are very individualistic themselves, right? Academia, working as a professor, super individualistic, super isolating. You guys are my colleagues, so talk to me as much as possible, because really, you're my coworkers that I come to every day. Lawyers, accountants, maybe, for example. Okay, so some work is very individualistic, and that can be very isolating. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind: it's great to work at home and to work from home, and it's great to be able to work from anywhere in the world. But it's also great to have that level of stability and expectation that you're going to come into work every day and have a group that you can affiliate with. What do you have to make that?
But I just want to say that's when they're going to happen, because
sorry, that's what happened?
That's no one's going to give up isolation. So imagine companies just saving up money on real estate. Okay. And people are going to be able to have 2 or 3 jobs. Imagine someone can work from home and then go Uber. Okay. And that's fair, yeah. So people are realizing greater opportunities and that they could kind of dabble in this, and dabble in that. Okay. Since we live in a capitalistic world. Okay. Sure. Very fair points. Corey, do you want to?
I just feel like isolation
Okay. Any other thoughts surrounding kind of when companies are actually toying with the decision of I'm saving a lot on real estate and a lot of the major operating costs versus why should I care about employees isolating or being isolated?
You can look at the branding aspects of it. For example, Uber Eats, they hire people based on not actually employees, they're just doing individual independent work. And so when they go out, they represent the brand, and when they don't provide the same level of service as they promised, of course they're not going to, because they're not actually part of the company, they're just doing whatever work. Okay. So of remote work, you also have to look at the branding aspect of whoever you're assigning that work to, they're representing your company. So if you have a big brand, then they could ruin it easily. So.
Okay. Any more thoughts on that point? So, okay, the financial person in the organization will probably kind of make that argument, we're
same thing as Coca-Cola. They don't promote healthier products; they promote that you exercise.
Yeah, well, they tell you have to live a balanced lifestyle. That's okay. It's all in moderation. Okay. But yeah, it is very tempting for an organization to say, yes, on our balance sheet, it seems way more attractive to kind of have all these cost savings in terms of real estate, right? But I would also push back on the point and say it is a bit of a short-sighted approach. You're saving a lot on real estate right now, but again, if you have, for example, the example that Chad gave surrounding gig work, which is Uber Eats and all these, those employees, and a lot of them are kind of burnt out because they're doing a lot of work. It's all kind of on a per order basis. So again, you could cram in 2 to 3 jobs in one day, right? That's great at the start, but it also leads to burnout. It leads to major burnout with employees. And that is where the concern is when that burnout translates into bad customer experiences. Somebody might lash out on a customer because they're just physically and emotionally and psychologically they're tired that day because they've done 2 different jobs already, and then they're kind of putting it all on the customer. So that is a major concern, and the cost of that, I think, is higher and outweighs that. Also, when employees kind of lose sight and they're no longer kind of embedded in the environment, it does take a toll on their human capital quite a bit. And you end up with an organization that just has very stale employees and very stale human capital. And that's not good for the long run. Short term, sure, lots of cost savings, materials-wise, but there's a bigger cost when it comes to human capital. Okay? And that, I would say, is the comparative, or that's the main argument for why we invest in diversity programs, we invest in mental health programs in the workplace. It's not because it looks good. Well, a lot of organizations do them because it looks good and it's kind of society says yes to it. But also, you cannot ignore how valuable it is for your human capital.
I was just going to mention that if an organization has workers that do remote work, you should offer benefits like mental health and, group collaboration.
Usually you'll see it's under the employee assistance program. So any job you get, is usually the organization has an employee assistance program, usually offered by MHR. You call and they can pair you up with a psychotherapist. They have all sorts of things that fall under mental health initiatives. So those are offered. One thing that I'm dealing with in my research area is that this is all great, but when it comes to these benefits, there are so many restrictions on how you can use them, and there's a quota on how many times you can call the line. So that's why, for example, I'm pushing for what can employees do on a day-to-day basis with their coworkers that could actually generate better outcomes in a more sustainable way. So there's food for thought.
So there's a Shopify.
Yep.
Has if you work there, you can work from home, they can also work at the office, but they have workout classes and meditation classes and stuff that are run there or outside. So you can go to that would also probably benefit your workplace.
And finally, to wrap up, we also touched on this a bit, but diversity. What are our thoughts on diversity? How are we doing in terms of diversity in organizations nowadays? Are we thumbs up? Yes, we're diverse organizations and we're doing great and we all feel included? Or are we not doing well in terms of diversity? What are our thoughts? Can I get a general overview? What was the last thing? Yay?
Yay.
Okay, so we're not doing well in diversity. Now, why are we not doing well in diversity?
I feel like diversity really depends on the location of whatever company we're talking about.
Okay, we're not done speaking yet, so just putting it out there.
So let's say Canada, for example. Canada is becoming a more diverse country every day.
Sure.
So there's more different types of people, races, and communities involved in the workplace in Canada every day. So I feel like Canada is a very diverse system when it comes to the workplace. Let's say we're in
Norway, Finland. I was in Finland in December. Holy homogeneity. My God, I was the most exotic person in Finland. I swear, and the loudest.
Well, let's say Finland or that specific area where we don't have really diverse set of people. So it's mostly just their people.
Same ideology, same thoughts.
Yes.
Okay.
Same ideology, same thoughts, same society. So yeah, it really depends on
where you are, and you need to reflect that in your society.
Yeah.
Right? Noah, more points?
Well, I just want to counter that and say that I don't believe that Canada is a diverse country. In Ontario, we may be a diverse country. In Toronto, we are a very large population. We grew up here, and have grown up around diversity, but in the other provinces and territories, I would say we are not diverse.
Okay.
We are getting there,
Okay.
but it could be better.
Corey?
I feel like some of the diversity is potentially have things for companies who have in lower level jobs and diverse
Sure.
jobs. You look at political jobs, not that.
Okay, so great points from Andy here. One thing that I'll kind of add to Noah's point, be very conscious of the bubble that we live in. We live in Toronto especially. Okay? Go 40 minutes outside the city and it's very different. The number of times people travel outside Canada, like people who live in Hamilton, for example, the number of times they actually leave the country, that was my first time meeting people who have never left Canada ever in their life. When I moved to Hamilton to do my PhD. So the experience could be very, very different moving across Ontario, moving across the country as a whole. For example, the level of diversity in this class is whoa! And then tomorrow I go to Windsor and it's oh! Again, it's like Finland. I'm the most exotic person there. So tomorrow I'm going to Finland, Ontario, Finland. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another fact, I'm not done, jeez. Another thing to keep in mind, and that is that point of surface level versus deep level diversity. Okay? When we say Canada is a diverse country, sure, you may walk on the street and see a lot of different faces, a lot of different skin colors, a lot of different backgrounds. But another aspect of diversity that we need to kind of pay attention to, another thing that comes along with diversity is the idea of inclusion. Okay? It's one thing to say that you're bringing in people from all over the world and you're having them sit in this one country. But it's another thing to be able to include them in the workplace and making them feel like they're at home. Okay? So we have two different layers or two different concepts here. Okay? So yes, as an organization, it's great that I publish my annual report and it has, that generic diversity picture where I bring in somebody in a wheelchair, somebody from this background, somebody from this background. It's great, everybody does it. But it's another thing when the organization truly does work that aligns with that. When an organization truly has programs that foster that inclusive culture. Okay? And that is somewhere where we need a lot of work on. That is probably the aspect that is really, really not in good shape.
Is there I don't know if it's a rule or I don't know what it is, but they action plan where you have to have a certain criteria?
Right. So in the U.S., what we know it as affirmative action, right? Here, what we hear more of in Canada is the employment equity plan. And it's essentially a plan that is put in place by government for employers that have 100 employees or more, right? It's to encourage them to put in effort to mitigating barriers of entry into the workplace, right? So when we hear kind of like, I think Corey mentioned this, like, look at politics at the political level, it's all minorities like men. Why do we not see a greater representation of women? Right? It's that same argument. How do we mitigate the barriers? And how do we offer more avenues for women to enter the workplace and for them to be more represented in the workplace? Right? So we have those efforts in place. Oftentimes, one mishap that people fall for when it comes to employment equity is they think that, when it comes to job applicants, obviously we're going to hire the woman because, we want more women and, we're going to say sorry, no to the man. It doesn't work that way. Number one thing that we do is we have to make sure that they're both equally qualified. If the woman does not meet the minimum qualifications of the job, the organization does not have to give her a job just because she's a woman. That is a misconception, right? But oftentimes the rhetoric that you hear out there is that when actually employment equity, it does make sure, or it does promote the idea that, no, you have to make sure that everybody meets the minimum qualifications, and then you start looking at this, right? But nobody gets hired just for their diversity. They have to have met the minimum qualifications first. Okay? So that's something to also keep in mind. That's a mishap that we need. Okay, so before you head out today, if you'd like to write down a thought, comment, or question for me, anything that you'd like to make note of, please put it on the back of your participation card. No, just first thing is fine. And then before you head out, please draw. Whatever preferred thing is. Just put them over here, and